Greetings, my fellow degenerates. My name is Rot, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, which you very well might be, then hi, hello, howdy-o, nice to have you. If you are new here, then my pronouns are he, him, I'm a trans mask creator, and I mostly make videos about art topics and my own experiences. I'm your run-of-the-mill trash small-tuber who hasn't seen sunlight in years, basically. Now, normally, I prefer to stay away from covering serious or heavy topics and controversy on this channel, even though I am an art YouTuber and we are known for being petty and trying to cancel each other for the most bare bones and harmless of offenses. I don't much enjoy participating in controversy, and I'm very anti-censorship and anti-harassment. I'm also admittedly a very anxious person, and I expect this video to cause a lot of stress for me when it goes up just based on the subject matter. However, I feel it's worth making because not many people are discussing the topic outside of in, comment sections, and I have a lot of strong opinions and my own perspective on the situation that I find is kind of missing from the main discussion. Before we get into everything, I want to provide some content warnings that I will put up on the screen for you to read. This video will be touching on some sensitive and serious topics, and I only want to do so in the most respectful and genuine way possible. As such, I would like the discussion in the comments to be measured and respectful as well. Any comments that are bigoted, worded in a cruel manner, or are otherwise disrespectful and inflammatory will be removed. Feel free to comment your own opinions down below, even if they differ from mine. I don't mind. But I beg of you, please keep discussion productive and respectful to every party involved, even those I will be criticizing. Everyone deserves respect. With that being said, let's get into things. Roughly about 2 weeks ago, a YouTuber who I have been a fan of for several years, known as Crowman or Crow, released a video titled, "I was cancelled for defending Melanie Martinez. Let's talk about it." So, as you might imagine, the title intrigued me as a very dedicated fan of Crow. You see, the thing that originally got me interested in their channel in the first place was their videos on the Melanie Martinez and Timothy Heller situation, which I will discuss more in just a minute. I had not heard of the controversy that this video in particular is about, and thus I clicked on it as soon as I saw it and watched it all the way through. At first, this video floored me. To summarize its contents briefly before I go over it in more detail later, Crow talks about a situation having to do with a larger YouTuber, Brad Taste in Music. Brad is a YouTuber that, as you can imagine, makes videos about his personal opinions regarding music. From what I understand, he mostly reacts to the albums of different musical artists and gives his detailed thoughts on them, that kind of thing. Crow explains that Brad had made a video about 6 months ago in which he criticized their 2-hour deep dive video on the aforementioned Heller and Martinez case. If you are unaware, this is a video that sits at over 700k views, is 4 years old, and that I was very familiar with, and that I and many others saw when they were younger. Crow describes Brad's intent through this video as being intentionally very harmful. They paint him as a clout chaser, a manipulator, completely incorrect, and worst of all, they imply that he's someone who wants them to suffer and succumb to mental health issues. Now, as a subscriber of Crow who has watched most of their videos and had never even heard of Brad before, I was initially very biased in their favor in this whole thing, and I was and am very familiar with their mental health struggles. Not in a personal sense, of course, I just know what he puts out into the world because I've seen all of his mental health updates. As he has said himself, he has been struggling with mental health in unfortunate circumstances for a long time, and because of my knowledge of that based on what he spoke of in past videos, I was floored. I was angry at Brad based on how he'd been characterized in that video, and as such, I left a comment on the video voicing my feelings on the matter. When a couple people replied to me and corrected me, providing me information that completely contradicted Crow's account and characterization of Brad and the controversy itself, I deleted my comment and decided to watch all 8 hours of content Brad had put out on the situation. This includes the 6-hour livestream debunking Crow's Heller and Martinez video, as well as the 2 smaller livestreams, each one 1 hour, in which he responds to Crow's newest video. And after looking over everything and considering the wider picture as a whole, my perspective on the situation completely changed, and I mean the whole situation. Because of the severity of it all, as well as the profound impact that the deep dive that Crow made had on both Timothy Heller and especially many other victims and young people, myself included, I feel compelled to properly dissect, pick through, and provide necessary critique on both a YouTuber that I once adored, as well as to present my own opinion on the whole situation. With that being said, I also want to add that this video is not like a commentary video in the sense that I'm not going to be watching the videos and responding to all of their points one by one. Considering that there's up to 8 hours of content at this point, we'd be here forever. Though I will be showing the necessary clips when I feel they are pertinent, this video is going to be mostly a summary and a discussion of my feelings on it. As such, I will link all of Brad's live streams in the description. By watching his content, you will get to see both Crow's videos in their entirety, as well as Brad's rebuttals or own points in response to all of his points. So please don't just take my word for it, I would recommend watching through them all and forming your own opinions on the situation. So allow me to start with a brief discussion on the Melanie Martinez and Timothy Heller allegations, being that these allegations are the source of the conflict between Crow and Brad. I will try my best to word this in the most respectful way possible because of the subject matter, though I will be having to censor some words so that the algorithm does not hide this video and nuke me from the face of the earth. For those of you unaware, in December 2017, Timothy Heller, a female musician, accused Melanie Martinez, another musician and previously Heller's close friend, of S.A.ing her at a sleepover after they smoked the devil's lettuce together. She released a detailed statement in which she discussed the alleged assault and named Melanie as the perpetrator. After her accusation was made public, Melanie Martinez released a statement in which she said the following sentence, quote, "She never said no to what we chose to do together." Because her response was often cropped down to the statement, "She never said no," Martinez released a second addendum in which she clarified that she would never be intimate with someone without their absolute consent. I will leave a Twitter thread in the description that further details the timelines of this situation and also provides screenshots of all of their collective statements if you'd like to read them. Since the situation was publicized, neither Heller nor Martinez have pursued legal actions against one another. Note that I will discuss my further feelings on the case itself later in the video. Continuing on with the timeline, several months after the release of Heller's accusation, in mid-2018, Crow released their first video discussing Martinez and Heller, siding with Martinez and discussing their own personal reasoning for doing so. After that video, which Crow himself admits is poorly made, they released a follow-up a little over a year later, this being the 2-hour deep dive that I mentioned before. This video is notably different from the first, featuring a lot of evidence, using that term loosely here, and debunking Heller's claims and discussing her other behavior in order to prove that she is a liar and that Martinez is innocent. This video went relatively uncontested for 4 years before 6 months ago Brad Taste in Music streamed his live reaction and rebuttal to the video. This will come up again later, so just note that he has been known to not like Melanie or her art, and he has been unfortunately experiencing harassment from Melanie's fans because of this. His stance in his live reaction is that Timothy Heller is telling the truth and that Melanie Martinez is a perpetrator of SA. Since then, Brad's fans, as well as others, have been commenting on Crow's videos related to Martinez and calling him out for what he said in them regarding Heller. This finally brings us up to 2 weeks ago, when Crow released his response video to Brad in which he doubles down and claims to have been cancelled, this being the video that I already briefly discussed earlier. So that's the full abstract timeline of events. The reason why Brad and Crow are on the outs is over this disagreement about who the guilty party is in the Martinez and Heller case. Crow believes that Melanie is innocent, and Brad believes that she is a perpetrator of SA. I have noticed that on either side of this conflict, people have been relatively black and white in the comments regarding what their opinions are as well, and they have been aggressive. Crow fans and crybabies, which is the name of Melanie stans by the way, have been saying that Heller is an evil liar who is maliciously trying to drag an innocent woman's name through the mud for a small scrap of fame. They also like to claim that people who side with Heller are supporting false accusations. On the contrary, Melanie anti-fans, Brad fans, and Heller stans claim that Crow, his fans, and crybabies all support the R-word, or are R-word apologists. Now, I acknowledge that these are, yes, the most extreme parts of both sides in their arguments, and not everyone is this aggressive on either side, but I have seen enough people choosing either black or white in a morally gray, uncertain situation that I want to provide my own perspective. So who do I agree with? Do I side with Heller or Martinez? Is Brad correct or is Crow? Well, my honest answer is that I don't know, and you don't know, and that I don't completely side with anyone, and I think this black and white mentality is a detriment to the argument as a whole. Let me explain. All the public at large knows for sure about the situation is that Melanie and Timothy were intimate. Melanie confirmed as much in her first statement in response to Timothy's allegations, when she said that Timothy never said no and that they both actively consented and chose to be intimate together. A lot of crybabies like to plug their ears and pretend that the two were never intimate at all, but both sides acknowledge that they did have relations. The argument is not whether or not the encounter happened, it is whether or not the encounter was consensual. Timothy claims that it was non-consensual, and Melanie contested her and claims that it was consensual. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter comes down to testimony. Only 2 people know the truth about what happened that night, that being Heller and Martinez themselves. Because their claims about the nature of the encounter are opposing and will likely stay that way, the public is likely never going to get the full truth of this situation. I don't know what happened, you don't know what happened, no one knows what happened but them. It's down to a she said conflict. Melanie has not been proven guilty of committing a crime, and Timothy has not been proven to be guilty of lying. The whole thing, because it lacks concrete evidence and proof for either side, comes down to a matter of the court of public opinion. That is the objective truth of the matter as it is currently. Now, this is where I insert my genuine opinion on the conflict based on what the objective truth is. You see, I think that Crow, Brad, and others are completely within their rights to believe whichever party's story that they think is more likely. If Brad believes Heller's testimony, then he's entitled to that. And if Crow believes Melanie's testimony, then they're entitled to that. However, where my gears begin to grind on the issue is the condemnation of either side. Now, do I think that Crow and Crybaby's condemnation of Timothy has been much more unfair, victim-blaming, and inflammatory than Brad and others' condemnation of Melanie? Yes, but I believe that both sides are taking things a bit too far. I am a very staunch believer in innocent until proven guilty. I am not comfortable naming Melanie as a perpetrator of such a heinous, horrible crime on testimony alone. I am not comfortable calling her the R-word or assuming guilt on her part because of her social standing and her money. Frankly, Brad comparing her to people like R. Kelly and especially Jeffrey Epstein, as well as people going around and calling Crybaby supporters of SA or R-word apologists, all on the word of one person, is completely not okay and inappropriate. This behavior is immature, inflammatory, and overall unhelpful to any discussion. On the other hand, I am also not comfortable calling Timothy a liar. If what she says happened is true, then she has been treated completely unfairly by so many people, and what people have said about her is just disgusting. She has been dragged through the mud, called a clout chaser, a leech, a liar, and probably a bunch of other things, all because she dared to speak out on what allegedly happened to her. Crybabies who are going out of their way to harass her, her supporters, and whoever sides against Martinez are just as, if not more, disgusting and horrible as they accuse Timothy Heller and company of being. Now, whoever you make the decision to believe and side with on this issue, it is not okay to go out and harass the other side. Melanie and Timothy, especially Timothy, have dealt with waves and waves of shit over this for the span of the last 5 years. If you choose to believe Timothy, calling Melanie the R-word and accusing her stands of supporting that is not okay, because even if you do believe Timothy, there is no evidence that actually proves Melanie's guilt, and her stands aren't supporters of SA because they do not believe that Melanie is a perpetrator. Similarly, if you choose to believe Melanie, calling Heller and others on her side evil, clout-chasing hater liars and harassing them is not okay either. Just like Timothy, Melanie doesn't have any concrete evidence to prove her innocence, meaning that Timothy might very well be telling the truth, and therefore her supporters wouldn't be advocating false accusations and unfair platforming because, in their eyes, they believe Timothy. So my call to action here is to leave support and positivity in the community of the person you would like to support and refrain from being awful and shitty towards the person that you don't. Especially if you're a Timothy supporter, go leave a nice comment for her to see somewhere and brighten her day a bit. She has gone through the ringer over the past few years and could likely use some support. Brightening her day is much more effective at helping her mental health, I would imagine, than leaving a nasty comment underneath a Crybaby's fan video or something. Personally, my approach is to remain neutral and keep my mind and perspective open. For many years, I blatantly just believed Melanie wholeheartedly and called Timothy Heller a liar. Not to her face or publicly or anything, but to friends and others while I was speaking to them in private on many occasions. And if somehow Timothy is here watching this video, I want to apologize directly for that. I'm sorry, Timothy, for staunchly siding against you and calling you a definitive liar for honestly really circumstantial, victim-blaming, and bullshit reasons for a long time. I genuinely hope that you go on to have a fulfilling career in life. Speaking of really circumstantial, victim-blaming, and bullshit reasons for disbelieving someone, let's now discuss Crow's 2-hour deep dive on the Heller and Martinez allegations. As I mentioned before near the beginning of this video, I originally became a fan of Crow's because of his deep dive, and this is the very same video that actually informed my previous stance on Heller being a liar. Prior to seeing that video, actually, I fully believed Timothy and was not a fan of Martinez, but the deep dive is what won me over to Melanie's side and convinced me to start listening to her music and engaging with her art. When I was a young idiot child who could not think for himself, for the life of him, I only disagreed with a couple of points and mostly agreed fully with Crow's opinions, but revisiting the evidence as an adult who has experienced my own share of maltreatment and now has an understanding of things like toxic and healthy relationships, I have a new perspective on this video. And this perspective is that Crow's 2-hour deep dive is a hodgepodge of often circumstantial, victim-blaming arguments that when held up to scrutiny do not hold much water. Again, I would recommend checking out Brad's video, though I don't fully agree with all of his points either. An overwhelming majority of his arguments in response to Crow's made more logical sense to me, and I think that he's right. And while I don't fully agree with his conclusion, like I'm not fully on the fuck Melanie train, I do agree with a lot of his reasoning. To summarize, Crow's video uses the philosophy of Occam's razor as its backbone.
Now time for a reminder of something I mentioned earlier on in this video and in the Tim vid called Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is more likely to be true. I've gotten enough people making sad attempts to debate me to notice that believing Timothy requires you to make loads of excuses for her behavior. You have to explain all her esoteric behaviors away with assertions like, well, she was traumatized, or but she's mentally ill. Meanwhile, believing Timothy requires no mental gymnastics whatsoever. Thus, I conclude that believing Melanie is innocent is the simplest solution and the most likely to be true.
However, despite that, Crow makes many logical leaps throughout this video that are assumptions on top of assumptions on top of assumptions, and aren't really the simplest explanations, really. A great example of them just kind of taking something and running with it is when they infer that because Heller is from Oregon and Martinez is from New York, Timothy likely was the one to introduce Melanie to the devil's lettuce because it was legal in Oregon first. He takes that statement and runs with it even further to claim that because Martinez once spoke in an interview about how her first time smoking the greens was at a sleepover where she was pressured into partaking by a friend, it was more likely that Timothy made up the entire essay story to cover her own ass and flip the script if it came out that she was the friend who pressured Melanie into smoking. Don't believe me? Here's the clip.
Weed was legalized for recreational use in Oregon back in 2014, whereas New York is still fighting for the right to toke in their downtime. The political environments are totally different. Again, this is just a head scratcher, not hard evidence or contradiction, but it's weird enough to be worth thinking about. Also, Melanie stated previously that her first time smoking weed was at a friend's sleepover. She was against it, but her friend pressured her into it. Could this have been about Timothy? Did Timothy flip the script to protect herself if this got out? I'd say so.
There's also an entire section in which Crow breaks down the English syntax and verbiage in Timothy's statement and says that because her sentences are either too long or too short, she uses passive voice, and because she occasionally throws in an honestly, that she must be lying because liars speak in short or long sentences, use passive voice to divorce themselves from lies, and overuse the word honestly. And while these things are, yes, signs of lying, they could just be signs of anxiety in general, especially because Timothy herself said she was nervous about coming out about the situation. Outside of that, in one moment, Crow claims that most victims of the R-word do not provide statements with the kinds of elaborate detail that Timothy did. However, later in the video, they go on to ask Timothy smugly why she did not elaborate on what kind of toy was used in the alleged assault.
And in her statement, recall that she says Melanie used a tool to rape her. What happened to the sex toy she was allegedly assaulted with? Did it just evaporate? I mean, the statement is already so detailed. I'd like to know why she can't produce the sex toy.
Even outside of flimsy, kind of related things like that, most of the video is just an elaborate character attack. Crow constantly dogs on Timothy and rubs her lack of success and her being less successful than Martinez is in, talks about Timothy's questionable online behavior in the past, even analyzes her body language in interviews, and uses all of these things to point to a motive for her lying. Even outside of that, Crow uses Timothy's BPD, or borderline personality disorder, as another point to suggest that because she has BPD, she's more likely to be lying about certain things and viciously seeking vengeance against Melanie for dumping her. Now, as someone with a lot of mental conditions, I can acknowledge that mental health conditions can and do influence behavior, but I also think that Crow's implication that Timothy is inherently untrustworthy due to her mental health conditions is flimsy at best and ableist at worst. I do also want to note here that I have heard people say that Timothy doesn't even have BPD, though I know she has mentioned having it before in vlogs from a few years back. So I really don't know what her exact diagnoses are, so it's very possible that she might not even have BPD. From some cursory research, it seems like she does, according to just online sources, but I also recognize that this information might be outdated, so just a heads up on that. Finally, another big point that Crow used against Timothy is the "I wouldn't do that if I were in your situation" argument.
If I was going to share my experience with my abusive ex to help women, for example, I wouldn't be complaining about his selfishness. The time he refused to drive me home because he was mad at me for living far away, like I could change that, so I had to call my father and have him drive 45 minutes to pick me up, 45 minutes back to my house, and then drive himself back to his house, all because my then boyfriend was a lazy-ass prick, is not something I'd be talking about. Number 11, those now deleted photographs of Timothy dressed up as Melanie. As I stated in the Tim vid, I consciously avoid anything that reminds me of the man who assaulted me, down to so much as eating his favorite kind of chocolate. And as I said in my video about why I hate trigger warnings, I brushed my teeth with kids' toothpaste for years just to avoid the trigger of minty breath. Sorry, I'm not sorry. I absolutely cannot wrap my mind around the idea of loving a rapist. The woman she claims betrayed her, drugged her, violated her insides with a sex toy. That sort of thing would kill me. Something similar drove me to self-enforced celibacy for about 5 years now.
Timothy has claimed that a lot of her behavior in the past, namely staying Melanie's friend after the alleged assault, dressing up as her, and dates not lining up, is due to trauma and Melanie's power over her in their relationship. In fact, she says it took her so long to come out about her story in her statement because she didn't even fully realize that it was an R-word until her friends told her that it was. Crow uses his own past experience with SA to claim that it couldn't be trauma because trauma would never make him forget when his own assaults happened. He claims that Timothy messing up dates due to time and memory loss as a result of trauma could never happen just because he doesn't experience it. He says that Timothy dressing up as Melanie after the assault allegedly happened is illogical because he could never imagine dressing up as his own assailant. The thing is that I don't fully disagree with all that Crow says in this video. I think that yes, some of Timothy's online behavior has been questionable. I think she's probably said and done some shitty things. The whole encouraging her fans to harass Melanie fans, the scamming Lil B by pretending to be trans thing, as well as her going after Billie Eilish, supporting Amy Schumer, and the stuff that she said in reference to Eugenia Cooney, and probably some other things are, as the kids say, not a good look. However, just because she has made mistakes and said some uninformed dumb things on her platform like 4 or more years ago in the past, 1, does not make her an evil master manipulator who has not and can't ever improve, and 2, doesn't have anything to do with the validity or lack thereof of her accusations towards Melanie Martinez. Though Crow's deep dive aggressively claims to operate under Occam's razor, it really just operates under the perfect victim myth. If you're unfamiliar with it, the perfect victim myth is the belief that to be a victim of SA, domestic violence, or general maltreatment, you must be a perfect angel and completely without fault. Using Timothy's unrelated questionable actions, behavior, and even the actions of her friends against her as evidence to prove that she's evil spreads the narrative that, to be believed, a victim must be a perfect person. And this is ultimately why I wanted to talk about this video. This video affects more people than just Timothy. A lot of Crybabies and Melanie fans are incredibly young, progressive girls. Most of them, myself included at the time, saw Crow's 2-hour deep dive and these young people walked away with the takeaway that Timothy can't be telling the truth because she isn't perfect. Because she mixed up a timeline, because she stayed in a toxic relationship for years after an assault happened, because she has made social media missteps, she couldn't possibly be a victim. A lot of those people, myself included, applied that logic to themselves or other victims. In fact, from personal experience, I applied this logic to myself. Back when I was stuck in a toxic relationship and lacked bodily autonomy, I convinced myself that I couldn't be a victim because I had made mistakes. I was kind of shitty to the person who hurt me. I didn't say no loud enough, and therefore I was not allowed to be hurt or feel like a victim. Now I know that this mentality was wrong and unhealthy, but the ideas that I got from this deep dive and other sorts of things that promote our word apologism, it just stuck with me. As such, I just want to take a moment and remind everyone that you can be a victim even if you made mistakes, even if you have mental health problems, even if you stayed with your victimizer long after any assault or incident, or committed any arbitrary offense that Timothy is being crucified over. Just like I said earlier, I think Crow is entitled to his opinion. I do not think that he is wrong because he chose to side with Melanie. What I think was wrong was him directly calling Timothy a liar, insinuating that she was or is a bad person, and justifying it with circumstantial evidence and victim-blaming reasoning that attacks her character and not her accusations. This video parades itself around as a debunking as proof when it's neither of those things. I understand that Crow's argument was not any singular one of his points, but a combination of all of them. But because most of this bad behavior is completely unrelated to her accusations, it just comes off as gish galloping rather than presenting genuine actual evidence that, without the shadow of a doubt, proves Melanie's innocence. Hell, as Brad and others have pointed out, not all the evidence used can even be trusted. Crybabies have been known to fabricate evidence to try and prove Melanie's innocence and to make Timothy look bad. Crow even made 2 other videos that are still up on an alleged Instagram story confession and another DM confession, both of which were later confirmed to be fake. So with that being said, Brad's livestream on the deep dive from 6 months ago really opened my eyes when I watched it, and on the very off chance he's here then like, hey Brad, you seem like a cool guy, thank you for presenting your perspective. I also apologize to you, even though you probably didn't see it, for my initial comment underneath Crow's video in which I criticized your perspective without even looking into it. I'm sorry for that to anyone else who saw it as well. Finally, now we're reaching the end of this video. All I have left to discuss is Crow's most recent video on this subject, the one that sparked my interest in this situation in the first place. Now, before I cover it, I just want to say that these next couple sections are going to be pretty serious and perhaps upsetting to many viewers. If you need to tap out because the video topic has already been draining up to this point, then I wouldn't blame you. So with that, let's talk about Crow's most recent response. Since Brad's livestream going over Crow's deep dive, it has been about 6 months of silence. Crow says in this response that he was staying offline at the urging of his therapist to work on his mental health. He opens up the video with a frankly very, in my opinion, unfair condemnation of Brad and mostly others.
I'm not Piper, thank you very much. I was formerly known as Piper Sweeney, hence the channel name. You know, the Crow, formerly known as Piper Sweeney, but I dropped it because being called Piper makes me feel dysphoric. I know that's not relevant, I just felt the need to clarify that because of the sheer magnitude of people calling me Piper lately. It is never, and I mean never, appropriate to call a trans person by their former name. Please do not do that, it is highly transphobic. Use the name they give you. And don't say it's an accident. We all know what formerly known as means. And I introduce myself as Crowman at the beginning of every single motherfucking video. There is literally no excuse for this. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Now, as a trans guy myself, I empathize with Crow being upset when people misgender him or call him by his dead name. However, insinuating that Brad and others are doing so maliciously 100% of the time is, not true. Brad himself has said that he respects Crow's gender and who they are, and that he doesn't support going after them by purposely dead-naming and being bigoted towards them.
I'm deciding to leave the chat up, and I am aware that there are going to be people who are disrespectful towards this person specifically because of their, gender of choice, their orientation, just a lot of things that I think are really degenerate to go after. I find that behavior to be disgusting, and mods, if you see any of that, I would appreciate removing that, as that is completely irrelevant and just very toxic and harmful. I find that to just be the opposite of the golden rule right there.
Many people in the comments actually said that they thought that the formerly known as part of their channel name was an aesthetic choice, hence why they were calling him by his dead name. I'm assuming that Brad himself thought the same or just didn't even notice, because he never purposely said anything bigoted or inflammatory about their identity, and when informed on their identity, he did his best to use their preferred name and pronouns. Now, while Crow having his dead name in his channel does not give people the right to maliciously dead name him, I would genuinely like to suggest removing it. I understand that, Crow, you probably left it like that so people could find your channel by looking up your old dead name, but I sincerely suggest that you remove it from your channel entirely so that it avoids confusion, discomfort, and also harassment. From experience, I haven't been dead named once since I changed my channel name, and I think that is largely in part to me making my full aesthetic change and all. One trans guy to another, just a suggestion. Maybe remove your dead name from your channel entirely.
I'm not special at all, and I've really not contributed that much to her being perceived as innocent. She thanked people who helped prove her innocence long before my involvement on the scene was even a thought. I came long after everyone had made up their minds, and generally had little to do with how people decided. I only said things that people were already thinking.
I also want to mention that Crow claiming here that this video did not change the discussion is not true. You see, for years, most people that had made a video on the Martinez and Heller situation often cite Crow's video as the place to find all of the evidence for the case. Crybabies have been sending this video all over the place for years as a surefire way to prove Melanie's innocence. This video, while it was not the source of the Timothy bad, Timothy's a liar crowd, greatly affected the discourse and changed the argument for a long time. Hell, I assume that most people probably would just look at the runtime and assume, well, if it's that long, then they must have a good point. The only other thing that I want to go over in this video is Crow's insinuation that Brad's intentions were malicious in his covering of the deep dive. Several times throughout this video, Crow makes statements and insinuations that Brad wanted to tear him down and harass him for clout.
And 4 years later, here I am, more traumatized than ever and too depressed to stand for anything at all. This has been very well documented as I decided to go public with my mental health struggle and cognitive decline, and I can't help but wonder if that's why Brad decided to make his video about such an archaic video. After all, it wasn't necessary to react to someone else's video to share an opinion on the rape allegations, let alone a 4-year-old video when there are recent ones that have better analytics. I'm not generally a paranoid person, but choosing me, period, and at this time feels intentional, because I'm in no position to fight back, and I'm sure he prefers it that way.
He says all of this based on a second-hand account of what Brad said in his video. I say second-hand because he admits that he did not watch Brad's video and that he just heard what he said in it based on what his sister said.
On a more serious note, I said to my sister one day, I wonder what Brad Taste in Music said about me that got people so riled up. And she said I'm better off not knowing, that he said some bullshit about me, and that there's no way he had good intentions. And while that was very disappointing to hear, I trust my sister, so I elected not to watch Brad's videos about me or read the hate comments that I could avoid.
And just a bit later, he says that his sister got her information about the video from a third party herself.
Now, after some prodding, my sister finally told me what he said, and I'm like, beyond pissed off. Note that this was like a game of telephone, by the way. She didn't watch the videos either. Someone told her what he said, and then she told me what they said he said. So, I may be wrong about some details, but I'm not wrong about the way I feel about the details. Does that make sense?
Crow is responding to arguments that he believes are Brad's that he got from a secondhand source of a secondhand source instead of watching the video. Bruh. Now, I understand and agree that if the live stream will cause deep and intense stress, Crow should avoid watching it. However, blindly stumbling around and responding to arguments that Brad didn't even make throughout his video is not helping Crow's case. This is why I won't be responding to most of this video, because most of it is Crow responding to arguments that Brad didn't make, or it's criticism of the Me Too movement, which I am not really informed enough to properly comment on, so I'm just gonna leave that one. The only other part of this video that I want to talk about is Crow using his mental health struggles as a way to manipulate their audience, as well as their accusations against Brad, claiming that he purposely targeted them in order to worsen their mental health. Now, this is a hard subject to talk about in general, and I want to treat it with a lot of care. Crow is suffering, and I don't think that he's intentionally using that suffering as an excuse for his behavior. I don't think that he is intentionally trying to be manipulative. However, the last few clips that I will play are hard to watch, and I believe they are, even unintentionally, incredibly manipulative and gross.
Anyway, I think I handled it pretty well. I popped about 7 or 8 hydroxyzine, and then when that didn't help, I went on a walk to the gas station to buy beer. Combine that with anxiety, and you'll understand why every waking moment of my life is spent in agony. Well, I guess I shouldn't say every waking moment. Not because I have moments of peace, but because I have nightmares every night. So it's every sleeping moment as well. And then they put me on a new medication for anxiety at the 11th hour. I wasn't given any more benzos, unfortunately, so I guess I'll just have to stay miserable as I wait for the medication to build up in my system. But I also don't want to let a Brad ruin my sorry-ass life. He's the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, but if I kill myself, he wins, and I don't want that.
I'm genuinely sorry and feel so much sympathy for what you're going through, but saying that if you self-delete, Brad wins, implying that he wants that in any way, shape, or form, that's just not okay. It's incredibly irresponsible to spread something like that on your platform, Crow. Please get some help, maybe stay offline for a while, and when you're able to come back to this whole situation, you should apologize to Brad for that statement. It's just not okay. Ultimately, I understand where Crow is coming from here. From his perspective, Brad is an evil, mean Melanie hater that wants to send harassment his way. While many people have been lax, Crow has a point when he says that there was a mob sent his way at the hand of Brad. This is true. However, while there was a mob, Brad never called for harassment and has been vocal and genuine in his pleas for people not to be rabid animals, so I don't think that the mob can be attributed to intentional cruelty on his end. This is more a fault of his audience being shitty on their own rather than him guiding them to be. And I'd argue that people leaving measured comments beneath a video so full of victim-blaming rhetoric is helpful to people who may just be seeing it and not considering other perspectives. I will acknowledge that in several places, Brad and some people in chat were unnecessarily cruel to Crow while watching his deep dive, though I would also argue that it was kind of fair on Brad's part because he seemed to be tone matching the video itself, and Crow himself was not nice to Timothy Heller in that video. Both sides of this conflict have been pointing to the other and saying, "You're biased," as a way of discrediting each other. I've noticed. While I believe Brad's opinion on the Heller and Martinez case is likely influenced by his apparent distaste for Melanie's art, as well as the honestly fucking awful way that he's been treated by Melanie stans, who have been harassing and threatening him and his significant other over his subjective opinions on Martinez, by the way, it can be argued that Crow is biased himself. Though he may not have started out as a Melanie stan, he certainly became one and has been one for the past 4 years. He's made videos upon videos about how much he loves her art, has bought a lot of her music and merch, and genuinely seems very dedicated to his support of her. So I don't think that this argument is very compelling on either side. It is not fair for people to boil down Brad's entire opinion to Melanie hater wants her to be guilty, and it's not fair for people to boil down Crow's opinion to Melanie lover wants her to be innocent. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I can really empathize with Crow here. He's going through a difficult time. People have not been nice to him, and it feels like it's all Brad's fault. However, the fact of the matter is that no matter what you think of him, Brad never went out of his way to be malicious, it seems. He simply shared his own perspective and opinion on the situation, and to me, his perspective, though I don't fully agree with all of it, is just as worth being heard and engaged with as Crow's was. As such, I want to end this video with another couple of calls to action. First, watch all the content on this situation and form your own opinions about which side you would like to support. Don't just take someone's side without looking into anything, including mine. Do your own research and form your own opinions. Second of all, I want to encourage people to leave both Brad and Crow some support. Crow is in a very bad mental place at the moment, and as Brad said in his stream, it would be both mature and kind to leave a comment wishing him well and hoping for him to get better. On the side of Brad, I think that he handled the situation quite respectfully for the most part. If I were him in that stream being accused of wanting someone I've never even met to self-delete over an argument, I'd have been way more pissed and less composed than he was. He's also been getting harassed by crybabies for months over his subjective opinions on her music, which he's allowed to have, and the stuff that he's been dealing with is just not okay. I strongly suggest you watch all of his streams on the matter again, and if you're interested, maybe watch some of his other content and leave comments of support for him. Overall, my biggest point with actually any drama, but especially this one right now, is just don't send hate or vitriol to anyone. I wanted to make this video because I feel as though people have been unreasonably cruel on all sides of the matter. Everyone, whether that be Martinez, Heller, Brad, or Crowman, they have all received massive amounts of disrespect and hate over this situation. It is up to you as the viewer to form your own opinions and support who you think is worth supporting, but please do not send inflammatory words to anyone. Let's be honest, people in situations like these benefit much more from positivity than negativity. With all of that out of the way, I hope this sort of overview kind of video was alright. I don't normally make commentary like this, but this was a subject that was really important to me due to the amount of reach that Crow's deep dive had when it came out, as well as my first-hand experience of its effects. I also would imagine that because of our similar content, a lot of my audience overlaps with Crow's, so that's another reason why I wanted to say something. Again, as I said at the beginning, feel free to leave a comment discussing your own opinions on this whole dumpster fire. Just be respectful as possible to everyone involved, I beg of you. Thank you all for watching if you got to the end of this video. I appreciate your support, and I'd also appreciate it if you left a comment letting me know how you enjoy these, longer, more commentary-esque videos that air on the more serious side of things. I made another video kind of like this a few months ago, and it didn't do very well, so maybe go check that one out too if you'd like. And also let me know if this kind of content is what you'd like to see going forward. They are hard and draining to produce in many ways, but I also feel quite passionate about making more temperate, controversy-related videos in which I can promote support and love over harassment. With all of that being said, rate and subscribe if you feel inclined to do so. I still have commissions open, so DM me if you'd like to order one. Remember that all of my socials and my Ko-Fi are linked in the description if you want to support me. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will now bid you all adieu.